Okay, here we're going to do a color chart, and it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to start off with using a sheet of canvas out of the canvas pad. It should have the yellow cover on it. Yours may different if the bookstore has a different source, but it's usually a yellow cover. And we just want to tear out one sheet, and you want to make sure that you tape it to a board or your tabletop, and having the bright white side forward. So if you kind of compare the two, you might be able to see it here. The side that we want is bright white. The back side is a dullish kind of raw canvas color. And you can also tell that the back side has little specks within the mesh weave there. The front side is also a little bit rougher because it has a gesso finish on it, so the canvas does not get ruined by the oil paint. So pretty straightforward. We're just gonna go down through all our tubes of color. I have them all kind of lined up here on the side for me. I'm not gonna go through all of them today, but just a quick little demo and have you guys kind of continue on. So starting off with your canvas sheet taped down, and you want to label each of the tubes of color that you have all the way down the left-hand side of the sheet. And with each color, we're going to paint one pure color swatch, so straight out of the tube. We're going to paint one tint, which is when we are adding white. We're going to paint a shade when we're adding black. And we're also going to desaturate with our complementary color of whichever of our pure tones we are using at that point in time. To make a black, we are going to combine ultramarine blue and raw umber 50-50, and that will give us a nice deep dark color to add to our pure tones. I'm also going to use like a number 8 flat brush or a number 6. It doesn't really matter. This just happens to be a nice size for the scale that we are working at today. I'm also going to be using the walnut oil to clean the brushes in between and at the end of the painting session. And I'm just using a pencil to label down on the left-hand side here. Also, before you kind of get ready and go in, you want to make sure that you open up your paint scraper, and it's the metal thing. And when you push it open, it already has a razor blade loaded in the top, but it has the safety handle out so you can't cut yourself. So you want to very kind of firmly pull it straight out from the top, and then look on the left-hand side. There should be a little opening slot where you spin the razor blade around and then slide it in. You can kind of catch sometimes, you have to kind of wiggle and push firmly, so just kind of make sure you're really holding on to the handle of the blade. And when you have it most of the way in like that, I don't like to push it all the way with my fingers. It's just too dangerous, so I turn it around and push it down the rest of the way in on the tabletop, and then your scraper blade is ready to go. And that's how you can clean up your palette at the end of the session, like so. And then I just wipe it off in my cotton rag. Ready to go. So to start, I'm just going to mix my black up. So I'm using a little bit of the ultramarine blue and equal amount of the raw umber, and using my palette knife to mix everything together. I'm kind of smashing things down and scraping it, and smashing down and scraping it across. What I'm looking for is looking through the paint to the white paper that I have underneath my glass, and you should put white paper under your glass palette. And I'm looking for the absence of any of the two colors that I added in. So I don't see any more streaks of blue, I don't see any more streaks of brown, I just see a really nice dark black happening now. So that will be the base that I'll use for my shaded colors. Wipe that off of my rag. So the clean palette knife. And I'm just going to start with the cadmium yellow here. And it's just straight out of the tube, not adding anything to it. And I'm just loading it up onto like the top half or 1/3 of the bristles. You don't want it to go all the way into the ferrule because that can make it really difficult to clean. And it starts to make the nice straight brush hairs start to fray and spread apart as the paint gets jammed down in there. So you kind of want to make sure that you keep all the paint loaded just in that top half as much as possible. And when I'm putting it down on the canvas, I want to have vertical strokes and horizontal strokes. So that makes sure that I get all of the texture on the canvas covered, so I don't have any white dots kind of poking through the surface, because those white dots can kind of change the way we interpret a color visually. So we want to have as pure a color as possible. So once I have that main swatch down, I'm just going to wipe out the excess paint into my rag. And that initial color is going to stain the bristles, but don't worry about that. It's not going to hurt things. Next swatch down is going to be a tint of that cadmium yellow. So I'm going to take just a little bit of the cadmium yellow, you know, half a pea size, something like that. Put that down. Then I'm also going to take about that same amount of white, maybe slightly more, just so you can see a difference. In the module it says 50-50, but I want you to use more or less until you're able to see a visual difference, a change in that hue. Some colors will take less white, some colors will need more white to see that difference, because some tubes have more opacity, they have more pigment load in them, so it just takes more to make an effect. So I smash it, mix it around. Then I like just to scoop it up on the palette knife. Then I can load the brush from there. Vertical, then horizontal. And you should be able to see a nice tonal difference between those two. This is a much richer yellow, but this is a much brighter yellow with that tint of white to it. So once I have that tint down, I go back to my rag, wipe off the palette knife. I'm also going to wipe out the brush, just getting the majority out of it. Then I'm going to move on to the shade. So again, some yellow. This time I'm just going to use very little black, almost nothing, because it will change the color pretty dramatically very fast. So again, smashing around until I don't see any color streaking, so it's nice and homogeneous. Then scrape it onto the palette knife, load the brush, and paint down my shade of the cadmium yellow. So big change with that one. The more black you add, the more it will start to tend towards a green. Palette knife clean, brush wiped out. And now we're going to do the desaturated color. So with the desaturate, that's the opposite on the color wheel. So the opposite of yellow is purple or violet. So I'm going to use my quinacridone. Oh, it's on there. And if your paints are dry, you grab a pair of pliers and just crack it open. And just like for the black, with your complementary color, you're going to add very, very little, just enough to change the intensity of that hue. So I'll start off with a fresh batch of the yellow. I'll go back down here, and almost nothing. Okay, a piece of quinoa, really, really small amount. Smash until you don't see more streaks. Load the brush and paint on down. So that was a pretty dramatic transformation. You can do a little bit less too, so it's more of a subtle transition from the main yellow. But you can see the big change you can go with adding a little bit of complementary color to your main swatch. Again, wiping palette knife clean, wiping the brush clean, and then you just kind of repeat that process all the way down. So for the yellow ochre, you can again use the quinacridone to desaturate. And as you move down, you go into blue, which the complement is orange, green, the complement is red, orange, the complement is blue, etc., etc. Just reference the color wheel that is in the painting modules, and you can see what is the complement for each given color. And then at the end, in between colors, depending on the size of your palette, you'll need it clean. So here's where you can use your paint scraper and just kind of scrape away from you to get a nice clean palette. Then just wipe that off in your rag, etc., etc. So that would be good for the palette. Now for cleaning brushes at home, we don't use any solvents, so we just use a little bit of walnut oil, and I just pour a small amount on the palette. And I just want to run my wiped out brush in some of that oil, and you'll see some of the color coming out. Then wipe that into the rag. And one more time. You can see very little colors coming out now. And wipe that into the rag. And you're ready for your next color on the way down. If you start with your light colors, working towards your dark, you can probably get away with just wiping out into the rag only and not having to clean with the oil in between. So that just kind of speed things up for you. But if you really want to make sure that you don't have any color interference, you can wash in the oil in between. Now, having gone through the oil twice, now I can take this brush to the sink with a bar of soap, just underneath some lukewarm water, and you swirl the brush on the soap, and then swirl it in the palm of your hand, rinse, soap, hand, rinse twice, and you're set to go. And your brush will be clean and ready to go next time you have a painting session. Making sure that you don't pour any of the oils, any of the paint residue down the sink drain. It was very, very bad for the plumbing and bad for the environment. So make sure that you always wipe up everything with the rags, then hang the rags up for them to air dry, so they can evaporate and be safely disposed of when they are completely full of paint residue. If there are any questions about the color chart, go ahead and send me an email and I'll try to answer them as best as possible. All right, go for it, see what you get. One more thing I wanted to add about cleanup is that the paint on your palette does not have to be thrown away. These big piles of paint that I have on here are wet and they are active and they can stay good for a long time. These have actually been sitting here for about a week, and as you can see, I was able to use the brown, the blue, and the white just fine, so there's no need to get rid of them. You can wipe up and scrape off any of the thin little sheens of paint that you have, because they will dry up. But for these larger sections, you can just go ahead and leave them there. Get a piece of cling wrap and just lay that right on the top, or a piece of wax paper, and they are protected, and that will keep them open for weeks at a time. So you don't have to waste paint. You can save your money that way. That way, it also keeps stuff from getting into it, especially if you have some fancy mixes of paint later on when we get into the more intense paintings. All right, thanks.